before starting, this is the final event of TERAIS, but I want to tell you where we started from. And the start of TERAIS was many years ago, was 2018 at the International Conference on Intelligence Computing. And we met, in fact, it was a meeting which was organized by Igor. And we met with Igor and Stefan Wertner, and we came up discussing, the workshop was on adaptive interaction with robots. And at that time, my presentation was on humanizing human-robot interaction. So I was very much centered in human-robot interaction, as Igor and Stefan Wertner from Hamburg, he was also there. So that was just to give you an idea of what is the timing of EU funding. 2018, we did one in the middle, we didn't go through, but then at the end we succeeded. So we enjoyed the project very much. Our main contribution, as I was saying, was mostly on human-robot interaction, and that is because of the fact that the lab, in fact, was very much, and it is still very much centered on robotics and neuroscience, and the use of physical systems, robots, to understand ourselves. And build robots that understand ourselves better. So it's a virtual circle that goes around. And one of the topics that we were very much developing then, and we are still doing here with the group, which is now led by Alessandro Sciutti and Francesco Rea, the goal was not to investigate intelligent robotics by itself, but the development of intelligent behavior, which resonates very much with what Angelo was referring and was telling you before. So our long-term guidelines that were included in the framework of TERAIS were anthropomorphism. We were interested in understanding systems with the level of complexity of a human being, which is a choice. There are other animals and other systems which are less complex, but very interesting anyway. But we were interested in anthropomorphism, this engineering approach that is understanding by building things. That was the second, and the third one was developmental, because we thought that it was impossible to build an intelligent system. It should be, or it may be easier to build a system that becomes intelligent. And that was the other one. So this was the development of interaction. That was the baseline, at that time. The other thing we were very much interested, it was to go beyond biomimetism. In robotics, there is a lot of activity on biomimetism, which is interesting because you build things that are complex. But if you stop on building descriptive models, you miss the opportunity of going beyond and try to understand and to build models that explain why they are made like that. And I think that only if you reach that level, you really get the maximum out of building anthropomorphic or biomorphic systems. So that was one of the other keywords. HRI, and the other things that we are observing is that this idea of HRI, personal robots. If you look the history of personal robots, you see a list of failures. Not one, at least until now. I don't know. Maybe now it's changing, but I'm not so sure. If you look the history, they all failed. Why they failed? These robots were also interesting, nice to look at, but they failed. And the reason why they are failing, they were failing, and I think they are failing now, is that there is this mismatch between acting and understanding. These personal robots are, somehow good in moving around, in telling you things, in understanding words, giving nice replies as in robots, but they don't understand. I mean, and the main reason why they failed, it was not because they were moving badly or they were not interesting, but because after a while, people interacting understood they were not understanding. It was not interesting to establish a relationship with these robots. So this is the reason why we at that time we think, and we still think, that we need to focus on the ontogeny of social relationship, which was also the backbone of Angelo Cangellosi talk before. We need to address how we develop an internal model of each other. We change, we interact in different ways with children and with elderly. And when we grow, we change our interaction way. So there is always a bidirectional communication, a bidirectional relationship which is built and maintained. How? That's the question that we are asking. And to answer this, you remember I was talking about the engineering approach. We used the ICAB. The ICAB was in fact designed, and the whole project was exactly designed not to build a robot, but to build a tool to understand cognition. So that was the original motivation to build a robot. And in fact, we are now using it in two, broadly speaking, in two ways. One, to implement models of human behavior in the robot, but also using the ICAB as, again, Angelo showed, the possibility of controlling, of doing experiments of interaction, between two systems which are, morphologically similar, but with the fact that with the robot, you can control its movement very precisely and repetitively. So if you have to do experiments, you can do it. Otherwise, you can't. So these two ways of on one side, to study how we are made, our body, but on the other side, how we interact with each other, which is, which is the mark of being humans. What it means to be humans. To me, it's being able to establish a relationship. It's a relationship. Humans is a relationship. The humanity is a relationship. It's not something that stays in a single system. It's a relationship between two, and the robots can be used for that. So, and this is somehow interesting if you think about that, because using robots you can investigate the dual role of actions. Let's say the traditional role of action is to act, exchange, pass objects, grasp and move, and we certainly. That's one of the main goals of having a body, to interact with the environment. But the other, it's also to communicate. I'm now gesticulating, I'm looking at you, I'm moving around, and while I do that, I'm communicating something to you with my movements. And some of these messages that we exchange are explicit. I was told that if I do like that, it means that I'm cheering someone. If I do like that, it means you come to me. And in Italian, of course, we have a lot of different gestures. So some of them are cultural. We learn by others, but some of them are implicit. The way I move to grasp an object and to lift an object is related also to the elasticity of my muscles, and it is related to how the brain controls the movement of the muscles. And these are implicit. These are related to the fact that our body is physically made in a certain way. And this is the part which is important, because it is inherited by evolution. The reason why we look around, we think that, with gaze, it's a message of what I am interested to, which is true in somehow, but is a consequence of the fact that our retina is made in a given specific way. So if you look at evolution, you see that we have been very smart in exploiting all possible tricks that evolution gave us, to exploit these tricks to improve the way we interact with each other. There are some fantastic examples of this, but that is implicit. It's not something that it is programmed, like when I say, come here, please. It's our brain, it is there. And in order to study this, you can use the robots to see what are these messages, because you can control the movement in a precise way. And in fact, there are a lot of messages, you can see here, they are listed here more or less, but you can move the eyes, how you move, the prosody of the voice, the speed of movement, a lot of these messages that you exploit to socially communicate, and some of them are there given for free to us, for free, millions of years of evolution. And it is interesting, that's the, one of the main topics of the research, the main stream of research that also, Alessandra Asciutti and Francesco Rea now are continuing, this balancing between studying humans, how they interact, how they communicate, and implementing some of what we understand there in robots. And this is a bidirectional exchange of information. Very important part. And as I was saying, it's a teamwork. Now with white hairs, an old professor is very much happy. Well, on one side, the unhappiness is the fact that when I started working like this, I was expecting, a bigger advance, a faster advance of research. So now I realize it was not possible. So I'm unhappy on that side. But what I'm happy of is that I see people that were working with me, like I was saying, Alessandra and Francesco, which are now continuing. There is a group at IIT which is continuing along this path, and this is the best thing it can happen. So with this idea of humans and humanoids, with neuroscience and robotics, with neuroscience and engineering, and the powerful of engineering is exactly like that. So later on, you will hear a little bit from Omar, and there is going to talk a little bit more specifically about what we did in TERAIS, but I just wanted to give you the overview. And remember, 2018, 2022, 4 years to get the project. So for the young people, if you fail the first time, don't lose hope, okay? Just continue. And if the idea is good, it will win the funding. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I will talk about how to bring common sense to a robot. Right? So nowadays, of course, we see those LLMs driving robot behavior, but the LLMs, as we know from Angelo's talk, they are not embodied in the first place, and they need to collect some experiences. And we set up one experiment here for occlusion reasoning. So a robot is standing in front of a table, and he's being asked, is there a specific object? What is it here? A marble on the table. And from his point of view here, so from the left, you can see this is the view of the robot itself. Right? So he just sees some kind of cornflakes box or so, or cracker box, and he does not see a marble. But common sense tells us the table is large, there's also something behind the box, there's some space, and there could be an object, right? So you cannot just answer straight away, maybe what young children might do, there's no marble, right? But you have to reassure, is there maybe a marble behind that cracker box? So the only behavior that is possible for the robot is that he circles in some way around the table in order to see behind the cracker box, right? And in this case here, there's then a positive discovery so that he can answer correctly. Now we want to model this with a network that is basically untrained to anything, right? So we are not using LLMs or kind of exterior knowledge, but we want to make basically the robot explore its environment and discover by itself that certain actions can be successful. So we are basically treating this then in a kind of reinforcement learning scenario where the agents themselves, the actions themselves need to be explored, and there will be a reward in the end when the actions are successful. So there's an entire action strategy. Does such a network, for example, need memory? So does the network to solve this task require memory? Well, you could say, oh, it circles until it sees the marble and then it says, ah, there is one. But what if there's no target object, if there's no marble, right? If it doesn't have memory, then it faces the same situation over and over again. There's a table with a cracker box. Oh, I will look behind, and then it will keep circling and circling forever, right? So it actually also needs memory. So I show you here the architecture with which we tackled this problem. So we get this input, the vision, of course, of the robot's view, and also some language input or representation of language about the target object. And then we have a recurrent layer to record in memory what's being seen in the previous frames, for example, or how many steps it has already been active. And then there's two kind of actions. First of all, the reinforcement trained action here on the left. It decides what to do, whether to keep circling or whether to provide an answer already, right? And of course, we set up a kind of a framework so that it will be penalized if it answers incorrectly, and it will be rewarded if it answers correctly. But it will also have a small penalty if it circles unnecessarily, right? So it should not circle 100 times and then give the reward, but be relatively efficient. And then on the right side, we have supervised learning, so that actually a network learns if there's a marble and it says yes. So it's just a classifier, a visual classifier, right? So this, what makes things a bit difficult is that the classifier has to work in order to provide reliable estimates for the reward, and a good strategy needs to be in place so that the robot can acquire learning samples to train the classifier. So those two act hand in hand. Yeah. But of course, I wouldn't show you the model if it wasn't successful, right? So then I show you then some video actually how it is then working in action. So first here, the scenario is being introduced here. And we're going to see now 4 different cases, 4 different situations in the following, where there will be different outcomes. And in each case, there will be multiple very fast videos. They're a little bit fast at first. So here, the target object is immediately visible. And you can see the action is always stop. So it does not start looking around or so. And he always predicts. So in the second one, there's only an object that is larger. So let's the cracker box. Now he needs to look behind the object, right? And he starts circling around. So he move left a couple of times, 5 steps, until he's sure. Here he sees another object. He circles again. Sometimes he stops, circles a little bit more, and sometimes a bit less. But he always then gives the right answer. There's none. And now there's a small object on the table, another object, not the target object. And in this case, this cannot occlude the target object, so it's too small, and therefore he does not need to circle around it, right? So it's efficient and gives the answer immediately, in which it was no. And now this is the 4th case here, as in the initial slide. So there's something hidden behind the object. First he does not see it, and then he circles, see it after 1 step, and then he immediately gives this the answer. Right, so that's our model here. Yeah, so of course I showed it here as a success, but of course this model that does not use any prior knowledge is quite tedious to train. So you have to train a lot of examples. Reinforcement learning is sample inefficient, and you have to train whatever thousands of samples, and it only works really realistically in a simulator. Because we did not use any common sense knowledge. Also, even worse, maybe it is bad at generalization, right? So this model can do occlusion reasoning, but it cannot do really much other reasoning, like something kind of grasp it. Is it in grasping range or not, right? So there's many things to reason about. And with a specific kind of training, you can learn only one specific kind of action effects in the world. So we did another experiment nowadays with the use of LLM, of course. And there we benefit basically from the reasoning abilities of when using a common sense from many humans that is distilled in such an LLM. We came up with this multimodal environmental chatting agent, the Matcha model. So the task here is slightly different. It should it is being told here, pick up the metal block. There's nothing included here, but there's ambiguity because you don't know which block of those is metal, right? So we extended this agent with some kind of how can I get back actually? Yeah. So the tasks should actually be again some kind of actions that are performed by the robot. It should somehow touch those objects in order to feel what could be better. Yeah? For example, knock on those objects specifically, right? So we have to set up some kind of, now with the LLM inbuilt, the LLM needs to get updated about the environment state, but it also needs to drive actions by itself, those that are necessary in order to acquire the material information. So this is how the architecture looks like. First of all, there's a vision processing network that extracts visual features from the image scene. That's the vision part. And then this is being fed, those features are being fed into the LLM. So it feeds the current situation. It gets also the instruction here, what to do, right? And in addition, now you need to do some prompting. So it needs to know, oh, in this situation, you can knock on objects, you are a robot, and it has these capabilities and so on, right? And then you will get better information, right? So it doesn't work without prompt tuning. But the LLM should then interact with the environment if necessary, right? So if the instruction is ambiguous, it will have its control policy and do some kind of inquisitive actions on the objects. What is the height of that, the weight? How does it feel? How does it sound when I knock on that object, right? And then the information from the environment will supply additional features which the LLM can use. And if the features are complete, then it can answer the request. And this is then the thing in action. So you can see here the task in red, the LLM action in green, and it will, is there sound? The LLM action actually is to make some inquiry. There's no sound, but there should be some kind of knocking sound. And green is then the environment from the feedback from the environment, right? And so it says here that sounds silent, for example. The yellow one was silent, but the orange one here you see also the explanation. So that was very briefly shown. Here's another try. In this case, it does not get specific feedback like the sound is metallic, but rather more general feedback like it feels rigid or so, or it sounds ringing, for example. So a bit more like implicit way of response from the environment. Let's see, can I stop it at that right moment? No, I couldn't. But then you could also ask the LLM about the explanation, which forms then maybe the bridge also for TERAIS topics. Then that's for me, and Igor's next.
All right, so I will try to connect within this presentation to shed some light on what kind of research we try to do within TERAIS. The idea was to make it kind of beneficial for all the partners involved to benefit from combining partners' expertise. So we as developing institution already have some expertise like computer vision, quite a good group, or we have some experience with explainable AI, how we can understand the functioning of neural networks, but also some social psychology research. So that was combined with partners' expertise, where IIT partner has a long-term expertise with human-robot interactions, for instance, which is a novel area for us. But other things like autonomous interaction, robotic architectures, for instance, ICAP. And that also complements with UHAM's experience in using Nico robot that inspired us to also buy one, using it like cognitive robotics task, machine learning based approaches, but also LLMs, as Cornelius has shown. So the idea was to put it together somehow and consolidate collaboration through mutual exchange of competence. So therefore we had staff exchanges and meetings, etc., in order to develop something jointly. But that did not start from the very beginning, but graded during the project implementation. So when it comes to the robots, I mean, it's a well-known fact that the robotics is a very important field, and especially humanoid robots are gaining more importance, as witnessed by increasing investments into these platforms, because these robots are in a special position towards human-robot interaction, where because of their anthropomorphic features, they are in a better position to be better understood by people. That also imposes constraints how they should be designed. So concretely, in our case, we could take advantage of Nico robot that we, thanks to the support by the faculty, the dean years ago, we could buy one and have it available before the project started. So on the other hand, ICAB robot, which exists or being built by IIT Institute, is something that we could have access to thanks to our PhD students traveling to IIT and have gained experience. And as you can see, both of these platforms are coupled with digital twins or simulated counterparts, because that's very important for developing training algorithms in a safe, robust environment, which is the virtual reality or simulation. So we learned something about how to do human-robot interaction, and there are interesting questions, for instance, transferability of results. If we're studying certain mechanisms that work for not only one concrete robot instantiation, but also for another one. So for instance, if something works for ICAP, we can test it with Nico. Despite the fact that there are differences between the two platforms, we see that these are different price ranges, and we also learned that Nico has some physical limitations that prevent it from being used for certain kinds of experiments. But thanks to great mind of Andy, we were able to fix certain physical problems with, for instance, moving arms. And sim-to-real transfer is something that's typically done when one trains the robot in the simulation and then executes the policy in the physical environment. In the TERAIS, when we were writing the proposal, we came up with an idea of the so-called the robots that would be built using or respecting certain principles. So these principles or key pillars are namely human awareness, explainability, both of which lead to trustworthiness of a robot. So on one hand, we would like to have robots that are human aware, meaning that they will understand humans, being able to recognize their gaze, their gestures, facial expressions, but also the human awareness could be expressed by a robot's proper behavior in terms of its legibility of its actions that would be understandable by humans. Explainability, on the other hand, is something that sheds light on why the robot did what it did. So understanding its behavior or its decision-making properties, because we can have access to a robot's mind because it's a model. So trustworthiness is a long-term eventual goal that's a precondition for smooth, seamless human-robot interaction. And these pillars served as a basis for research that we developed, and I'm not going to go through that, but you can scan this for yourselves, what kind of concepts were involved there, wrapped around human-robot interaction scenarios, which is a kind of social thing, but at the same time focusing on developing robots like cognitive robotics field involving machine learning, mostly neural networks. Thanks to Carlo, I have these beautiful pictures that I can show to you. And this slide shows these research directions which were evolving from the very beginning, starting from the 3 pillars, and how those pillars were manifested in different concrete directions, which are shown here, eventually resulting in publications that we had to report. So for the first reporting period, we provided a list of publications, and there was a criticism, though there's not enough joint publications. So that was a signal for us, all right, we need to think alternatively, try to do more joint papers. So fortunately for the second reporting period, we could already show much or many more joint papers, and we will continue this trend. So after the break, you will have an opportunity to listen and watch our colleagues who will give short presentations about concrete mini projects that were already, many of those which were already published, 8 of those. So I'm inviting you to that because I think that all these people have something interesting to show you. So thank you very much for your attention. I invite you to coffee break for 15 minutes and we will start at 11:15. Thank you.